Jake had spent the last 10 years under the hoods of cars, fixing engines, changing tires, and saving drivers from the headaches of breakdowns. Thanksgiving was the one day he usually took off. His small garage in rural Montana would be dark, the tools silent, and the scent of oil replaced by roasted turkey. His mother had made him promise to be there early this year. "No excuses, Jake," she had warned, wagging her finger. "You missed last year. And the year before that. Not this time." He had laughed and assured her he'd be there, no matter what. But just as he was about to lock up for the night, his phone buzzed. A desperate voice came through the speaker. "Hey, I really hate to do this to you, but my car just died. I have my wife and kids with me. We're stranded on Route 16. Jake sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. The roads were freezing this time of year, the temperature already dropping below 20 degrees. The thought of a family stuck out there in the cold while he sat at a warm dinner table didn't sit right with him. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said. His old tow truck rumbled down the empty highway as he made his way toward the stranded family. The night was quiet except for the crunch of gravel under his tires and the occasional howl of the wind. Finally, his headlights caught sight of the vehicle, a dark SUV, hood up, steam rising into the cold night air. A man in his late 50s stood beside it, waving his arms. The backseat light was on, and inside, a woman sat with two young kids wrapped in blankets. Jake pulled over and stepped out, his breath turning to fog in the crisp air. The man approached him, visibly relieved. "Thank you so much for coming," he said, shaking Jake's hand with cold, trembling fingers. "We were on our way to see family for Thanksgiving, and then the engine just gave out." Jake nodded and grabbed his flashlight. "No worries. Let me take a look." He popped the hood and leaned in. The engine was still hot, but the battery was completely dead, and the alternator wasn't doing its job. "This isn't something I can fix out here," Jake said. "Your alternator's shot. I can tow you back to my shop and see if I've got the parts to get you back on the road." The man, who introduced himself as David, exchanged a worried glance with his wife. "We don't have much money on us right now," he said cautiously, "but we can pay you something." Jake waved him off. "Let's get you warm and figure the rest out later." David let out a breath of relief, nodding. Jake hooked up the SUV and towed it back to his shop. The family huddled inside the small waiting area while Jake got to work. He kept an old coffee pot running in the back, and his assistant had left some cocoa packets behind. The kids sipped at their drinks while their mother rubbed their arms to keep them warm. As Jake worked under the hood, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The SUV's license plates weren't local, and when he checked the registration, the sticker was worn down, barely legible. But he pushed the thought aside. People came from all over, and the important thing was getting them back on the road. An hour passed, then two. The shop was quiet except for the clinking of his tools and the occasional murmur of conversation from the waiting area. David had started pacing near the door, checking his phone every few minutes. His wife sat silently, staring down at her hands. Jake finally stepped inside, wiping the grease from his hands. "She's good to go," he said. "Should hold up fine until you can get a permanent fix." David stood quickly, pulling out his wallet. "Please, let me pay you something." Jake shook his head. "It's Thanksgiving. Just pass it forward." David hesitated, his eyes searching Jake's face as if trying to read him. Then, slowly, he put his wallet away. "You have no idea how much this means to us." His wife stood as well, clutching her children's hands. "You're a good man," she said softly. Jake nodded, feeling an odd sense of unease settle in his gut. The family thanked him once more before climbing into their SUV and driving off into the night. Jake watched their taillights disappear down the road before locking up the shop. He was exhausted, grease-stained, and starving. His mother was going to kill him for missing dinner, but deep down, he knew he had done the right thing. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. Groggy, he reached for it and squinted at the screen. A news alert flashed across the display. "Breaking. FBI expands search for fugitive financier." Jake sat up, his heart suddenly pounding. He clicked the article and froze. The photo staring back at him was David. But the name beneath the image wasn't David at all. It was a name that sent a chill down Jake's spine. The man he had helped wasn't just a stranded driver. He was one of the most wanted criminals in the country. Jake's heart pounded as he stared at the news article. The grainy photograph of the man he knew as David was unmistakable. Same sharp nose, same deep-set eyes, same slightly graying beard. But the name beneath the image wasn't David, it was Marcus Ellington, a financial conman who had defrauded investors out of millions. He wasn't just wanted. He was one of the FBI's top fugitives. Jake swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had spent hours with the man. He had looked into his eyes, shaken his hand. He had even let his so-called family sit in his shop, sipping cocoa. And he had fixed his car for free. He read the article in a rush. Marcus Ellington had been on the run for over a year. He had used dozens of fake identities and had likely crossed multiple state lines. Authorities believed he was traveling with his wife and 2 young children, though some speculated the woman and kids might not even be his real family. Jake rubbed his face. What the hell had he gotten himself into? The more he thought about it, the more the little details from last night stood out. The way David, or rather Marcus, had kept checking his phone, his nervous glances, the hesitation in his wife's voice. It had all been right there in front of him, but Jake had ignored it. His phone buzzed again. Another alert. FBI urges public to report sightings of fugitive Marcus Ellington. Last seen near Billings, Montana. Billings. That was only a few hours away. Jake exhaled slowly. The right thing to do was call the FBI. The man was a criminal. But then another thought hit him. If Marcus knew the authorities were closing in, he wouldn't just sit still. He'd run. And if he had his family with him, things could turn ugly fast. Jake wasn't one to get involved in things beyond his control. He was just a mechanic. His job was fixing cars, not chasing criminals. But something about this didn't sit right. He had looked into that woman's eyes. She had looked trapped. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they were all in on it together. But maybe, just maybe, she and the kids needed help. His hands were still covered in grease from the work he had done the night before. That same work had put a fugitive back on the road. He felt sick. Sucking in a deep breath, he grabbed his keys and headed straight to the sheriff's office. The station was quiet, a few deputies sitting at their desks, sipping coffee. The sheriff, a stocky man named Keller, looked up as Jake entered. "Morning, Jake. Didn't expect to see you here today," Keller said, leaning back in his chair. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Listen, I think I just helped a fugitive last night." The sheriff's relaxed expression vanished. "What do you mean?" Jake sat down and told him everything. The phone call, the broken down SUV, the suspicious details, and the news article he had seen that morning. He even mentioned the way the woman had looked at him, the nervous glances, the way Marcus had been checking his phone. When he finished, Keller was already pulling up a photo on his computer. He turned the screen toward Jake. "That the guy?" Jake's stomach tightened. "Yeah, that's him." The sheriff nodded and grabbed his radio. "Get the FBI on the line. We've got a lead." Within the hour, the small station was swarming with agents. They had been tracking Marcus for months, but every time they got close, he disappeared. They grilled Jake for details, what direction they had gone, what the SUV looked like, whether they had said anything that might hint at their next stop. Jake did his best to remember. "They were in a black SUV," he said. "Looked like it had some out-of-state plates, but they were pretty worn down. I didn't get a clear read on them." The lead FBI agent, a woman named Agent Carter, nodded, taking notes. "You said they were trying to get to family for Thanksgiving." "That's what he told me." "Could have been a lie," Keller muttered. Carter crossed her arms. "Or it could mean they have a safe house nearby." The agents left within minutes, sirens blaring as they raced down the highway. Jake sat in the station, staring at the floor, trying to process what had just happened. He thought about the kids. The little boy had smiled at him when he handed him the cup of cocoa. The little girl had barely spoken. Were they in danger? Had they been forced into this life? Or were they just as guilty as their father? Hours passed. Jake was still in the sheriff's office when the call came in. "They found the SUV," Carter announced, stepping back into the room. "Abandoned at a rest stop 2 towns over." Jake's stomach twisted. "And the family?" Carter's face darkened. "Gone." Jake sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He should have known they'd run. Marcus had been smart enough to evade authorities for a year, he wasn't going to make it easy for them now. "They must have another vehicle," Keller muttered. Carter nodded. "We're checking surveillance." If they switched cars, we need to know where they're headed. Jake let out a slow breath. He had done what he could. He had reported them. Now it was up to the professionals. But something about it still gnawed at him. Later that night, after the agents had left, he found himself standing outside his shop, staring at the empty road. He thought about Marcus's wife. The way she had clutched the kid's hands. The way she had barely spoken. He thought about the look in her eyes. And then something clicked. She hadn't just been scared. She had been trying to say something. Jake cursed under his breath. He turned back toward the shop, his gut telling him that this wasn't over. And he was right, because 2 days later, he found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a single piece of paper. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were 3 words. Help us.